If you're spending your weekends creating content instead of living your life, I have a solution for you. Today, I am walking through my complete AI powered content creation workflow. This is the one that cut my own content creation time in half, and it gets me better results than when I was doing it all manually. So, to explain to you what this workflow has meant to me, let me just paint you a before picture. So, you could find me on a Saturday at 3 p.m., still in my PJs, still in bed, because I brought my computer into bed with me when I woke up because I had this idea, and I'm still writing and wondering why I even started a YouTube channel in the first place. Okay, fast forward to the after picture after I started using this workflow. So it's an AI assisted system, and this has let me post one YouTube video a week, like this one LinkedIn newsletter a week, 3 or 4 short reels, 3 to 5 text posts on LinkedIn and threads in a fraction of the time. I've been building this system for the past year. I've tested all the AI engines, I've tested I don't know how many tools. Most of them were not worth what they promised. But some of them did. And the result is a workflow that's working for me. And so I'm inviting you to take what I've learned and see what might work for you. I'm Laura Zovelson, and this is the Gen Expert Show, where we talk about thought leadership, personal branding, and how to build strategic marketing systems so you can be the go to in your niche without having to work nights and weekends to make it happen. So, if you're ready to treat marketing like an integrated part of your business and not just a side hustle, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. So here's what most people get wrong about using AI for content. They think that the value is in the volume. So more posts, more newsletters, more blogs. I think the real opportunity is actually in improving your time to quality content. We could call it TTQ. Maybe not. But AI can help you create real quality content that builds your brand and brings in clients. And it directly addresses the real time constraints that I think are real for all of us. Like, I need to schedule a doctor's appointment, or what the hell are we going to have for dinner? So the goal here is not to work the same amount and just pump out more content. I think a better goal is to reduce the time to quality content and either work less or redistribute that time to other parts of your business. Because let's be honest, if you're just pushing out BS, you can publish 7 times a week and you're still going to get crickets. It's not going to help. And if you leave AI content creation to its own devices, that's exactly what's going to happen. So, B2B decision makers, the ones that most likely hire you, they want thought leadership. They want opinions. They want outside help navigating uncertainty. So if your content doesn't showcase what you know, if it doesn't show why working with you would bring them a new perspective or a new path, well, they're just going to skip over you. I don't care how frequently you post, right? So I can't tell you what everybody else is doing, but today I'm going to show you exactly what I do to create 12 pieces of newsletter content in about a day or two. And then I can just set it and forget it. And so if you only do monthly content, you're good for a year, right? For a year. And if you do weekly content, then you're set for the whole quarter. So I'm going to get to the exact steps and tools in just a minute. But first, how about you drop me a comment? So, what is your biggest frustration with content creation right now? What's getting in your way? And by the way, I do read and respond to every comment, and your input really helps me figure out what video to make next and how I can best help. So, before we get started on the workflow steps, I just want to take a minute to remind you of the big picture. So, if you want to create an expert engine, what we do is we start with your point of view or your POV, and that is your philosophy or your methodology, your stories, and your opinions. And we take that and we put it out on a long form public content platform. So, LinkedIn newsletter, a blog, podcast, or YouTube. And that is what is going to build the trust that's going to get you hired. But first, we got to get you found. So, in order to do that, we use social media to push people back to that long form content because that's where the trust is built. So, for today's conversation, I'm mostly talking about how to put your POV out there in either a LinkedIn newsletter or a blog because I think that's the most accessible for everyone. But this can work regardless of what platform you choose. So, if you want to do a podcast or YouTube like me, you're going to have to budget more time because you have to do post production. But basically, the workflow is the same. Okay, so there are 6 steps to creating the content that's going to drive your expert engine. Step 1 is idea generation. So, one of the biggest things I learned over the last year is that AI tools work best when you point them at a narrow, specific topic. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're working with AI is to ask it to do too much. So, what you need to remember is that the context window has a limited amount of memory. So, the AI tool doesn't always remember what it's doing. So, this is one of the biggest reasons that people get suboptimal outcomes. So, if you go in there and you just type a prompt that says, give me 12 newsletter ideas and then write me 12 newsletters and then create social media posts that promotes those newsletters, the AI is really going to lose its mind. What I do is I break this up into smaller steps. So the first thing I do is I use a project that I created in Claude to generate newsletter content ideas for LinkedIn. And I've given it instructions and knowledge about my niche. And this is important. I also gave it documents that talk about my product and my frameworks. And then I specifically ask it in the system instructions to make all the content ideas connected or interrelated, right? Because remember, not everybody reads everything that you write. I talk about this more in this video over here, and you may want to watch that one after this one. But the algorithm does not show people everything that you do. So all of your topics need to relate to each other. So no matter which one that they read, they know what you're about. They know what you do for a living. That makes our content more bingeable. And it's actually part of what creates that bubble around us that we're an expert in our particular area. So I go to the AI tool I created specifically for idea generation, and I give it any thoughts that I've had or any good examples that I've seen. I kind of just keep a running log and notes for when I do this. I ask it to generate ideas that are specifically tuned to shift the beliefs of my target audience because I want to move them from awareness to interest, to decision to action. So I have to have specific pieces of content that focus on people who are in all stages of their journey and at all different places on their map to finding me, right? Now, if you join my Expert Engine program, I'll give you my tool and I'll tell you exactly what you need to do to customize it for yourself. But if you want to DIY this, I do recommend you create a tool specifically to help you with ideation. And if you're looking for instructions on how to write a strong prompt, I did that a video on that, and I will put the link to all of these in the description, okay? But the format that I give you in that video, audience, context, task, output, rules, just remember the word actor because it works with all of the AI models. It doesn't matter if you're working with ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, that prompt is going to work for all of them. Anyway, the output of this tool is some number of content ideas. Now, I usually shoot for 12 because that's a quarter's worth of content for me. So I can basically schedule 4 content sprints for myself over the course of the year and get it all done. So sometimes, when it's not going to put out 12 perfect ideas the first time, it'll recommend stuff I don't really want to write about, or it'll suggest an article on research that I haven't done. So there is some iteration here, but usually pretty quickly, I can get a set of 12 solid ideas. So that brings me to step number 2, which is hooks and headlines. Now, it might surprise you that step number 2 isn't an outline, but it's not. It turns out that for newsletters and podcasts and YouTube, well, it's just like for social media, okay? Hooks and headlines are super important. Packaging is important because that's what's going to get you the clicks. So I feed that list of ideas into my hooks and headlines tool. This one is a custom GPT that I wrote over in ChatGPT, and it creates the headlines and the first couple sentences. Now, let me be clear. I'm not always going to use them as written, but it gives me a lot of choices for each topic. So when I have these and when they as a set feel edgy enough and curiosity provoking enough, well, that's when I'm comfortable moving on to sort of the next step. Now, you don't have to do all of these steps in one sitting. So I'm outloading 6 steps here. You don't have to do them all in one sitting. Like for instance, you could do topics and hooks and headlines in a couple of hours, and then you could save the next couple of steps where your focus blocks for the next week. As a matter of fact, what you could do is you could set up 2 focus blocks every week, maybe for 2 hours at a time, and just continually work on your content. And that way you would kind of get a backup log of content that you can use and just schedule it going forward as you go. So the next step is to create an outline. So once I've captured a headline and a hook, and I'm good with that, I move to outlining versus creating the whole article. And the reason I do that is because it is really easy for the AI to veer way off course and take the article in a direction I don't want to go. So what I do is I take each headline and hook and I paste it into an outline tool that I created in Claude. And I tell it what I want the reader or listener to walk away with when they're done reading it. And then I'll offer it like a list of bullet points or main ideas that I'd like to say about the topic. And then sometimes I even write a paragraph or two just to get it started and make sure it goes in the direction that I'm excited about. And then if I have a story or a client example, this is where I'll put it in. And then I ask it to create the outline. But remember, these are all customized tools. So it already knows that it's for LinkedIn or YouTube, and it knows how long I want it to be and how deep I want it to go. So it has an idea of the structure that I'm aiming at when it creates the outline. Now, at this point in the process, it's kind of choose your own adventure. Once I'm happy with the outline, then I usually take it and I put it in the writing tool. But if you wanted to do like all of your outlines at one time, you could certainly do it that way too. You're going to have to find, a creative flow that's the most comfortable for you. So, step four is to actually write the article. So, I drop the outline into a fourth tool I've created, and this is another Claude tool. And this one is trained on my voice. So, the way I talk, the way I write. Now, I know there's a bunch of videos out there that can show you how to do that now, but if you want me to make one or recommend some resources about how you can make one, let me know in the comments and I'll make sure that I get some information on that over to you. The thing about the writing tool, this is another one where it's entirely up to you how much you use it or you don't use it. So I usually have it create a first draft for me because that really speeds things up if I have sort of a ground zero to work from. Sometimes I'll read it and I'll ask for like big modifications. Sometimes it's repetitive. And so I'm just like, take all the repetitive parts, let's streamline this. But once I kind of get a skeleton draft going, I take it out of I put it in Google Docs, and I finish it myself. Because this is when I put myself in the article, right? I take out anything that sounds like a bot, I fix where it's overgeneralizing. This is actually where the real time investment comes in. But when I compare this to when I was doing it all by myself and I didn't have any of these AI helpers, I am saving days. I'm serious, multiple days. So once you get your newsletter sounding how you want it, you might add a CTA at the end. Maybe you want people to book a call with you, or maybe you have a link to a lead magnet. And I usually add an image. And again, that's super easy. You go into Canva, you create a template for it so it's the same every time. And usually I just type right into the line in Canva, the subject of the newsletter, and it pops up a bunch of different pictures I could use, and they're all stock, and you have rights to them if you're a pro subscriber in Canva. You just drop those pictures into it and it's the same every time. So now you've got all your components. And then all you do is go into your LinkedIn scheduler or your blog scheduler, you upload your image, you copy paste out of Google Docs right into the thing. Maybe you do a little format of headlines and subheadlines, but you're done. Right. And so you can see that if you set aside 2 to 3 days to work through these four steps that I've just talked about, you could get a quarter's worth of weekly LinkedIn newsletters or blogs scheduled in that amount of time. But remember, my expert engine strategy actually suggests and recommends that we use long form and short form social media content together because one is really good for discovery and the other is really good for building trust. So when we move to step five, this is the part I think you're really going to like. So, step five is to repurpose. So, this is the piece where I think a lot of people just aren't taking advantage of what AI can do for you. I have a LinkedIn post tool that I built over in ChatGPT, and its entire purpose is to create 5 LinkedIn posts for every newsletter I produce. But again, you have to give it guidance. You could just go into the main chat and say, make me 5 LinkedIn posts without creating a custom tool, but you're not going to get the same results you are if you give it your voice, if you give it the angle you want each post to be about, so it knows what to pull from your article, right? So I actually tell it, take my article and I want you to do a post about the problem. I want you to do a post about the solution. I want you to do one on a story or a case study that's related. Now, sometimes if I haven't included that specifically in the article, I'll have to give that piece of information to it. But I'm actually working on a solution that'll make that a little bit easier. Then I do one on the steps that people could take to solve the problem, and that can turn into a great carousel. And then I do one that's an invitation to work with me. And then I also do a hot take that I generate with my hot take brand booster. But that's actually outside of this particular workflow because that's more on current events, whereas this can all be pre scheduled months in advance. All right. And again, I want you to remember that the CTA for call to action for 80% of these posts needs to drive them back to go read the newsletter, go listen to the podcast, go read the blog post. Because what you're looking for, this is how you're going to get results, is for them to go deeper with you so you can build that trust. Because then they're going to take the next step and reach out to you, right? They're going to DM you or fill out your book a call form or whatever that next step is that you want them to take. Okay, so you might be asking, what do you do or how do you repurpose if you don't use a newsletter? Well, you just grab the transcript of your podcast or your YouTube, you put that in the same tool, and the tool doesn't care. It puts out however many posts you need based on the topic that you covered in your long form content. Okay, so the last part of this repurposing puzzle is actually shorts and reels because we know that most of the algorithms really like video. So for me, because I use YouTube as my long form, I have an editing tool that's called Descript, and that actually has an AI function that goes through the video and pulls out clips for me that I just export and turn into reels. And that whole thing probably takes me 15 or 20 minutes extra from the post production I do. If you're doing a podcast, consider leaving the video on while you're doing your podcast because then you could do the exact same thing. If you don't want to do that, what you could do is take clips from your podcast and then do B-roll behind them, and that would also be a really easy way to get some video content coming out of something that's not video native. Now, if you are doing text, so a LinkedIn newsletter or a blog, and you're saying, well, how am I going to get a reel out of that? Yeah, I have a tool for that too. So you take the same text that you use, and the tool will spit out a short script. You don't really want your shorts to be scripted word for word, but it spits out a hook. And 3 points you can make and a CTA. So when I'm shooting a reel like that, what I usually do is take the piece of paper to wherever I'm shooting it, usually on my phone. I look at the piece of paper, memorize the hook, think of the 3 points, look back at the phone, and shoot. So if you've never done it that way before, you might be able to do 3 or 4 in an hour, but when you get going and you get comfortable in front of the camera or you get comfortable kind of using that hook 3-point CTA format, you can do 6 to 10 of those in an hour easily. And so, you set aside a couple hours at the end of the day and you could shoot all your reels for the month. So the final step, step 6, is scheduling the repurposed content and then lining it up for when you've scheduled your platform content. So I do a teaser the day before, and then I run 3 to 4 pieces of content that drive the traffic. So usually, because my primary platform is LinkedIn, my newsletter comes out on Thursdays. A lot of people have their newsletters come out on Tuesdays. Either way, you can do something that teases it the day before. Right. And then another post the day of that comes out a few hours after you've posted it, sending early traffic there. And then generally something on at least Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of the week for LinkedIn. Now, if you're using Threads or Instagram, they all have their own best practices that you can find easily on the web. But do pay attention to what days your audience is most active because there's no point in putting content out there if nobody's going to see it. So right now, I personally am using LinkedIn, Threads, and I'm testing YouTube community posts. And so I use Buffer for scheduling, and I can use it for everything I need except for the YouTube community posts. Now, my one issue with Buffer is it does not have great analytics, but there's tons of other tools. Now, I've tried most of them. I haven't found any of them that are perfect. And there is no third party tool that will automatically schedule your LinkedIn newsletter. You have to do that on the platform. But for the social shorts, LinkedIn, Threads, YouTube Shorts, Instagram, Buffer works as well as anything else. I do have an optional step 7 in this workflow, and I call it GoPro. And I think for a lot of people out there, you're going to be just fine if you just do your LinkedIn newsletter and then you do social media posts that drive traffic back to that newsletter. For most consultants, that is going to be enough. You're going to be doing enough that's different that helps you stand out, that you're going to be miles in front of everybody else and a lot closer to being the go to in your niche just by doing that. But if you work in a particularly crowded niche, or for whatever reason your audience segment is particularly scattered, you may want to take the next step because there's really not a lot of extra work involved in taking a LinkedIn newsletter and turning that into a blog, or taking your blog and turning that into a LinkedIn newsletter, and then taking whichever one you're native with and turning that into an email newsletter for people who are already closer to your audience. So again, you can create a whole lot of different touch points, so you're catching people wherever they are and wherever they happen to find you, with very little additional work, by using AI to support sort of that translation from platform to platform. So that's the workflow. And remember, this is not about pumping out a bunch of garbage. It's about reducing TTQ, time to quality. And think about it. Since you generated all of your social media posts from your long form post, which came from a strategic grouping that's related to that point of view, your philosophy and your opinions and your stories, it is guaranteed that all of your content relates to each other and builds the credibility and evidence that establishes you as the go to in your niche. So, look, creating this kind of content, it helps people understand what you do and why they should hire you. But you have to do it strategically and you have to be systemized about that. And I think that's where the AI tools really come into place, that they're finally at the point that they can help you create content and create this kind of body of work. And you don't have to basically have a second job creating content to make that happen. So this is what my new expert engine strategy is all about, right? The program gets you access to all of the tools that I just talked about, but more importantly, it helps you unpack that point of view, your unique methodology, your opinions that help you stand out from the crowd, and really helps you develop your stories that help people connect with you. And then what we do is we take the tools and we use those to enable you to create content in a systematic way. And I give you all the tools and then I help you customize them for your specific business. So you can build that body of work that's going to bring in a new caliber of clients. So you can get on the priority list. The link is in the description, and that's going to get you early access and a pretty fantastic discount when I open the doors. So, one last thing I'd love to hear in the comments. Was there anything in today's broadcast that surprised you? Anything you're going to try out in your own business? I'm really curious and I'd love to know. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you being here. That is going to do it for me today. Have a good one. I'll see you next time.